Nintendo has always loved some good old innovation. It's basically their thing to try out new things that other big companies wouldn't think much of with their consoles and games. This is especially true of consoles like the Virtual Boy and the Wii, both having a bit of a gap in the way that you played their games. And the way you play these games can really make or break the experience. And some of these games even required you to play with them with an accessory or two. So today I'll be looking at some of Nintendo's accessories. But not just any accessories, we're going to be looking at some of their oddball accessories. To start off, let's get some of the more well-known accessories out of the way. First up being Rob. I'm sure most Nintendo fans here know exactly what Rob is. This little guy was used for two Nintendo Entertainment System games, Gyromite and Stack Up. Rob was used a bit differently in both of these games, but I have to say it looks really slow to use, requiring a bit of patience from the player. Though I don't own it, so I can't say for myself what it's like. Oh, and this thing also kinda saved gaming or something. Go watch a video on that. I'm not here to give you a history lesson. Have you ever wanted to exercise? Good, now get off your lazy butt and get exercising with the Wii Balance Board. Joking aside though, the balance board was used for a surprising amount of games, though most of them seem to be shovelware, fitness, and sports games, so that's not really saying much in the grand scheme of things. What is saying something though is that, holy mackerel, they made a Garfield game on the Wii? Overall, I'd give it a solid I don't care out of 10. And the reason I say that is because I've only ever used the balance board of the Wii Fit Plus, which, well, I never played with much. From my experience though, it was more uncomfortable to use after a while than fun. I mean, really now, do you see older users being able to sit on this thing for a stupid meditation minigame? Yeah, I bet. Next up, we've got the Gameboy camera, which is infamous for giving out free nightmares. Using it, you could take some standard low-quality pictures, edit said pictures, and play some games with literal demons, among other things. Well, I'm sure not going to bed tonight. The NES Power Glove and NES Zapper. The Power Glove was one of Nintendo's little experiments. This one was meant to give users a different way to play their NES games. That way being motion controls. And you can imagine how that turned out. It was definitely a unique idea for the time, but it was criticized for its imprecise and difficult to use controls. The NES Zapper, on the other hand, was used for games like Duck Hunt and Wild Gunman. From what I've heard, it works well, but from my experience with using it at an arcade, it barely even worked. But the NES Zapper is old, and there may have been some other things affecting it at the time. This accessory even got an accessory of its own. No, that's just accessoryception. You know I had to talk about these. It's Amiibo, surprisingly popular little figures that allow you to do a number of different things within games, from getting items in-game to getting more items in games. Okay, but seriously, some of these things were really difficult to find when they first released in November of 2014. While this most certainly wasn't the first instance of stocking issues in a Nintendo product, this preceded two other Nintendo products that had a similar but much worse issue of selling out fast, the NES Classic and SNES Classic. All three of these things were too difficult to find, and it really frustrated me at the time. Fortunately though, now you can find most Amiibo fairly easily, even in big chunks. Cower before me, I have a villager Amiibo. Damn it. Moving on, we've got the DK Bongos, which are designed to be used with the Donkey Konga series. The interesting thing about these bongos is that a lot of people still use it to this day in more modern games. Not through any modding, but through a bit of loopholing. Heck, someone even beat Dark Souls free of all games with the bongos. You gotta wonder why you would put yourself through that kind of torture though. The Game Boy Pocket Sonar. This strange thing used, you guessed it, sonar to locate fish up to 20 meters underwater to help with fishing, and it also contained a fishing minigame. That's just about it for this one. Huh. It was only ever released in Japan, leaving those outside of Japan to weep that there would never be fishing pros. Now let's go over to Super Game Boy, but whoa now, hold your horses, pal. This isn't just any Super Game Boy, it's the Super Game Boy 2. Released exclusively in Japan on January 30th, 1998, it featured a much sleeker casing design, a Game Link port, and an LED power light as additions to the hardware. Firmware additions include 5 new screen borders to display while playing games, and that's about it. Everything else is basically the same as the original Super Game Boy. And for those who may be wondering, the Super Game Boy allowed you to play Game Boy games on the big screen via the SNES. If you're in love with arcade-style controllers, then I sure do have the thing for you. Here we have the NES and SNES Advantage. The NES Advantage features adjustable turbo controls for the A and B buttons, which could be toggled on or off of a button, an adjustable turbo rate, and a pseudo slow motion feature which basically repeatedly pauses and unpauses the game. This thing also eats up 2 controller slots, but to compensate for that, there's a switch on it that can change the controls to player 1s or player 2s. For the most part, the SNES Advantage is the same, but there are some differences like it being a third-party controller, and it used sliders for the adjustments instead of knobs. Okay, so I hate to jump on the good old relevance bandwagon, but recently Nintendo released an accessory alongside Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it being the Pokeball Plus controller, which is how much money? This thing allows you to play the Let's Go games with just a Pokeball. Never thought I would see the day that happened. It even lights up and you can hear the Pokemon cry from the Pokemon you just caught, and you can carry a Pokemon in it. I don't personally own the Pokeball Plus, but it looks like more of a novelty than a necessity, especially for the asking price. But if I ever see one for cheap, I might pick it up. Last but most certainly not least, we've got Nintendo Lavvo, Nintendo's step into selling cardboard. What are you doing, Nintendo? Nintendo Lavvo gave you cardboard to put together into different things, from a mini piano to a steering wheel. You may be thinking how much of a drag it is to build any of the Lavvo sets, but I had a lot of fun putting together each set in the variety kit. However, the robot kit, yeah, no, that looks like a pain. The games included with each figure, as I'll call them, were pretty lacking though. They'll get old after about an hour of playtime, which is a bit of a shame, but I don't see anyone wanting to play a full-on game with this. A little later on, they made the Lavvo Motorcycle compatible with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which, oh my gosh, that was a disaster. Remember when Lavvo was first announced and everyone was so surprised to hear Nintendo was selling $70 cardboard? Good times. Nintendo accessories sure can be weird, especially shown by the Game Boy camera, but by golly, where's that Wii Vitality sensor game?